An empire that had ruled a mighty capital watched strangers arrive with weapons and diseases that would change its world forever. In 1519, Spanish soldiers entered the Aztec world, but the final collapse would come through a deadly mix of war, political betrayal, and an invisible enemy the Aztecs could not fight. The Aztec Empire, also known as the Triple Alliance, was one of the most powerful states in Mesoamerica. At its center stood Tenochtitlan, a huge city connected with causeways and canals. Its markets were crowded, its temples were enormous, and its rulers controlled a vast network of tribute. But the empire had enemies. Many communities resented Aztec demands for tribute and military control. When Hernán Cortés arrived with a small Spanish force, he discovered something important. The Aztecs were powerful, but they were not alone. Local enemies could become unexpected allies. Cortés entered Mexico in 1519 and began forming alliances with indigenous groups who opposed Aztec rule. One of his most important allies was the Tlaxcalans, who had fought the Aztecs for years. These alliances would later become a major reason the Spanish could challenge such a powerful empire. As Cortes moved toward Tenochtitlan, the Aztec ruler Moctezuma too faced a dangerous decision. He could confront the newcomers immediately, or allow them closer while trying to understand their intentions. Eventually, Cortes and his forces entered the great Aztec capital. The meeting between Moctezuma and Cortes became one of the most famous encounters in history. The Spanish were welcomed into the city, but the situation quickly became dangerous. Cortes eventually took Moctezuma into custody, turning the Aztec ruler into a prisoner inside his own capital. Then everything exploded into violence. While Cortes was away dealing with another Spanish force, Pedro de Alvarado ordered an attack during an Aztec religious celebration in Tenochtitlan. The massacre caused outrage and the city rose against the Spanish presence. The Spanish were suddenly trapped. Aztec resistance became fierce and the conquistadors tried to escape the city during the night. But the retreat turned into disaster. Many Spanish soldiers and their indigenous allies were killed during what became known as La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows. But the greatest enemy was still coming. Smallpox had arrived in Mesoamerica with Europeans, and the disease spread rapidly among indigenous populations who had no previous exposure. The epidemic killed enormous numbers of people, including the Aztec ruler Cuitlahuac. The epidemic weakened the Aztec population at a terrible moment, with many people dead or sick. The empire's ability to resist its enemies was badly damaged. Cortes understood the opportunity and returned with a much larger force of Spanish and indigenous allies. In 1521, Cortes began the final campaign against Tenochtitlan. The Spanish and their allies surrounded the city, cutting off supplies and attacking its waterways. The Aztec defenders fought fiercely, but hunger, disease, and constant warfare were slowly destroying their strength. The siege became brutal. Fighting spread through streets and canals while the defenders struggled to find food and clean water. Tenochtitlan was being destroyed piece by piece, yet its people continued resisting, refusing to surrender their city. Cuauhtémoc, the final Aztec ruler of Tenochtitlan, became the central figure of the city's last resistance. He continued the fight as the capital collapsed around him. But by August 1521, the defenders could no longer hold the city against the combined forces surrounding them. On August 13, 1521, Cuauhtémoc was captured, and the Spanish-led forces took control of Tenochtitlan. The fall of the capital marked the collapse of the Aztec Empire as a major independent power. A civilization that had dominated the region was now entering a completely different era. The surviving evidence tells a complex story. Show a close-up of an ancient artifact in a museum case. Aztec codices, archaeological remains, and Spanish accounts help historians reconstruct the conquest, although these sources often present very different versions of what happened. Archaeological evidence also reveals the scale of ancient capital. Show a close-up of an ancient artifact in a museum case. The remains of the Templo Mayor and other structures show that Tenochtitlan was a sophisticated urban center, not the primitive city some earlier European accounts suggested. The fall of the Aztec Empire was not caused by Spanish weapons alone. Indigenous alliances, disease, political division, and the long siege all played major roles. The conquest changed Mexico forever, beginning centuries of Spanish colonial rule and enormous cultural transformation. The darkest truth is that the fall of the Aztec Empire was not one simple battle between two sides. It was a collision of armies, alliances, disease, ambition, and survival. The empire fell, but its people and culture survived. Comment which dark story I should expose next.